Hey everyone, Yashil here from Offline. Today, I want to talk about our negative mindset and how it's blocking us. I know many of you are thinking it's almost impossible to work in different countries, to take a bigger role, or even to try different job because of the language barrier and lack of communication skill or lack of experience or whatever, right? If you ever felt like this, today's episode is for you. Today's guest is Coco Romero Lee, who is a former private banker in Canada turned into a career coach for Latin American executives in Mexico. As a daughter of a Korean immigrant family, she saw her parents giving up on getting a job in Canada because of the lack of communication skill and cultural understanding. When she was taking a break from her banking job and tried different jobs in Mexico, she saw so many local professionals were losing international job opportunities because of the same reasons. So she decided to help the local professional hone communication skill and career strategy to success on the international stage. Today, Coco and I are going to talk about belief system that Korean people and Latin American people have in common and how we can improve it to get the job opportunity we want in the long term. Are you ready? Let's get started. Excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to our conversation today past few weeks.
I've also been very excited to see what you do, and I think it's very similar to what I'm doing out here in Mexico as well.
Yeah.
So I'm also very excited to talk to you today.
So I'm going to start with your own career journeys. I understand that you were a private banker at HSBC, but moved to Mexico, became an entrepreneur. So like when you started, decided to, okay, I'm going to just help this local executives. Like, why did you decide that kind of thing? So, there are so many other opportunities. Like, you never been in HR or you never been in trainer or something like that. But why did you decide to help these people to become a global leader?
I think a lot of it had to do with my personal story as well. Watching my parents immigrate to Canada and just lose so many opportunities because they were just not globally prepared, right? I mean, they're like old school Korean parents.
Yeah.
My mom moved to Canada when she was 35 or 36, and my dad was around 38 at the time. With the whole family immigrated, and my father was an engineer, my mom was a fashion designer, and they just couldn't find jobs. Number one, language barrier, and number two, network. And number three, like you always say in your pages, you could have a perfectly written English resume, but if you don't know how to interview, right, you don't know what to say, you don't know how to communicate. They lost so many professional opportunities because of that, and the two of them ended up opening a dry cleaners.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now you see similar things even in Mexico as well. So
exactly, because I was never in HR, but I started talking to a lot of HR professionals. I reached out to them and said, guys, what is the number one thing that you see here? And a lot of them had said, what, we would love to bring, Latin American talent all over the world. But here's the thing. One of the biggest hurdles that we have is a lot of these people don't have global adaptability because they've just never worked outside that environment.
Right.
Number two, language barrier is huge. And then number three, when I started doing a lot of translation for the Canadian Embassy, I also realized how many opportunities day to day are being lost just due to communication.
Right.
So, these guys come here with bags of money to invest in a country that they don't know.
Right.
Right. What's happening to the people here or people in executive levels that want to go and try their hand at being an expat or want to expand their career or want better lives for their families?
Well, I'm pretty sure that you work with a lot of intelligent, ambitious, and very motivated people, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't come to you to prove themselves, right? But
they wouldn't, yeah.
They would. I'm pretty sure there will be some struggles all your clients have in common. So could you tell us a little bit, what's the biggest obstacle besides language for them to go to the next step?
I think a lot of it is mindset, right? We talk about this quite a bit. A lot of people kind of block themselves even before they think they can get started.
Right.
The idea, obviously, in Korea also, you talk about this a lot in your blog as well, but the Korean mentality and the Latin American mentality is very similar. It's
I was surprised when you said that.
Yeah, it's very similar. It's scary, actually. So you do a little bit of a deep dive into the whole thing, and you realize like how similar the way that we think are, right? So essentially, a lot of people think, okay, number one, it's difficult. Number two, like, oh, because of, whatever, my language skills or whatever, I've never worked outside, so I can't. Or number three, I don't know anybody. Like, nobody's going to back me, right? Like, nobody knows who I am. Nobody can give me that credibility. So they just don't try.
Why would they hire me, right?
Why would they hire me? Like, why? Like, what do I have? And I think that mentality just blocks themselves in the beginning to begin with. And then they don't even try. They don't even try to get their resume translated or looked at. They don't even apply for those jobs that they probably are qualified for, right? Yeah. And a lot of people think, well, this is what I make and this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I've known my entire life. So this is it. Like, I can't even fathom or imagine myself making, $250,000 a year or whatever their goals are. Yeah.
So, like, why would we have that kind of like?
Well, in the Korean culture, I can tell you why, because like our parents drilled it into our brains when we were young, right? It's kind of, we have a lot of group mentality in Korea, right? So a lot of it is like, why are you standing out, right? Why do you think you think you can have something better? Like, why do you think you can work overseas when nobody else can? Right. And then here in Mexico, it's kind of like a crabs in a bucket mentality. It's very similar. It's very similar to Koreans in the sense that, like, if one person does it, there's a lot of jealousy that goes around it. And as a result, people don't want to stand out that much, right? They do the same thing. I think a lot of the times the human nature is always to fit into your society, right? You don't want to be an outcast. But for example, when I moved all the way here and did all those things, people thought, well, what are you doing? Like, you're going to some third world country. Like, what are you doing? You're a private banker. Like, what are you thinking right now? But it was one of those things that I thought to myself, you know what? If I don't do this now, I'll never have the opportunity to do that. And also had the little voice in my head that was for my mother that was saying that, like, what are you doing? Like, who do you think you are? Like, that was a lot of what I heard when I was growing up also. And I was also here, a lot of people would say, who do you think you are? Like, what makes you think that you can do this? And a lot of it, I think, was the inner voice saying that, like, that if I don't do it now, then I'll never know who I am. If I don't challenge myself in this way, I'll never know what the actual potential or the possibilities that lie, right? So I think that having that desire bigger than, fitting into your immediate environment is essentially going to be something that drives you forward, right? And also you have to have surrounding messages that support that, right? Maybe working with a coach, reading material that talks about that, right? Seeing success case stories, and because it works, right? And these people had kind of the reason that was bigger than thinking what other people think or that you were going to fail. That inner conviction, I think, is very important.
Sometimes, like, for me, like, of course, those kind of like social judgment or like the negative feedback from outside, it was big, but sometimes, like, I found like the fear was the biggest factor for me. Like, oh, what if I fail? What if I try and I didn't make it, right? Then, like, what would other people think about me? These kind of things were biggest factors for me. But as you said, like, we have to like try to educate ourselves. Like, okay, everybody has this fear, right? And then this is like the biggest, like, the obstacle that'll stop me. So you have to actually understand this is normal to feel like this way. You just like need to focus on like keep moving forward. That at least like, it helped me a lot as well.
Right. I mean, for me, it was easy. I ran away from everybody that I knew. So if I failed in Mexico, nobody would know.
Right. And then you can come back
and
home,
be
right?
like, I was in Cabo San Lucas. I got an amazing tan. I was just living the life, and now I'm back, right? But nobody would know that I failed.
That's good.
But to your point, I think, that fear is something that drives us, right? But the other side of it is, I think we judge fear and say, oh, like, you shouldn't be afraid. It's hard to be brave, right? It's very difficult. So what I always say is like, okay, what what if you didn't do anything? Because
Exactly.
inaction is action.
Right.
What if you didn't do anything and then you realize that you missed out on that great opportunity?
Right.
What if I didn't leave HSBC and stayed in Canada, talking about weather all the time and being unhappy, right?
Right.
Would I have learned how to speak Spanish? Would I have had the opportunity to work with embassy members? Would I have had the opportunity to work with all these companies? No. Right? So using that fear to say, what if you didn't do anything? Aren't you afraid of what you're going to miss out?
Mm-hmm. So another thing is people are very afraid of the fact that we are not native English speaker, right? So I'm like, I make mistakes when I speak English, right? I still make a lot of mistakes. And my husband even told me that you have such a weird sense of speaking things.
Humor?
Like,
the way that you form sentences is weird.
because sometimes I translate it from Korean to English and he's like, what is that, right?
What are you talking about right now?
So I think it's okay to make mistakes. It's just the language is just means, for us to communicate, right? Mm-hmm. And then of course, the English proficiency is very important, but I believe that the way we communicate is even more important, right?
Yes.
So to improve these kind of communication skill, what would you recommend us?
I feel that the English language is very straightforward, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the beauties of it. I know you and I speaking Korean, we have so many words in Korean that describes so many feelings, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of that language. Mm-hmm. Spanish is exactly the same, right? Spanish being probably one of the most romantic languages. There's different ways to say things, but one disadvantage is that in business, when you talk too much, right? In formal language in Spanish, the longer you speak or the more words you insert, the better. But in English, the more you can get to the point, the better. To improve that, I think a lot of the times putting yourself in those simulation type moments. A lot of our programs are based on this as well. We don't use textbooks when we work with a lot of our executives. We kind of put them and throw them into situations. And we do a lot of role playing, right? So, for example, when I was learning Spanish, I remember going out to the street and grabbing whoever I could speak to. And the local residents were not pleased. I did exact same. Yeah. They were not pleased, but they're like, why are you talking to me? I don't know, talk to me. Because I need to. It's not about you, it's about me. Right? So I think that's what I recommend a lot because the language is an organic thing too. So a lot of people don't realize that it changes over time. Certain words are more popular or less popular with however the climate is. There's all these buzzwords and things like this that are very popular now. Right? That we didn't hear about before. SaaS. But what is SaaS? SaaS. Right? Things like this, acronyms, right? Or words like blockchain that didn't exist, right? 20 years ago. But now you need to know what they are. So I think a lot of it is just kind of immersing yourself in that environment as much as possible, right? And I mean, reading is always good, but I would almost kind of say try to put yourself in that culture, whether it be by watching. I mean, if you're learning Korean, the best way to learn it is what? Watching, soap operas. Right. The Korean dramas, right? Yeah. Not only does it tell you the language, what's current, the people's way of thinking, right? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And also basically you kind of get a glimpse of the culture.
So I am pretty sure that as a native speaker and then you're multilingual as well, right? You get to see a lot of mistakes of, what the foreigners make, right? What's the common mistakes and how we can, improve better?
I think most of the time, we always speak both Koreans and here in Latin America. I feel like we speak very passively a lot of the time. That passive voice is used a lot, and I know why that is in Korean because we don't want to be too assertive.
Right.
It's actually considered rude.
It is.
We don't want to ask the right questions because it's oh no, I feel like I'm attacking this person. Right. I'm a huge fan of pointed questions. Mainly because I think that's just also just my personality. I'm very curious. But most common mistakes, just kind of generalize it. A lot of people are they're not confident in the way that they're asking. or like forming sentences. So it's a lot of passive speaking instead of active speaking. So that is the mistake that I see the most. And as a result, what happens is the message gets lost and it just looks like you're beating around the bush. Like you're not getting to the point. And as a result, what happens, especially in business situations, is that the other person either gets frustrated or doesn't understand what you're trying to say, or feels like this whole interaction was a waste of time.
Right. So actually, a lot of people make that kind of mistakes in an interview situation as well. So I did one-on-one interview coaching, back in like 2017 and 18. I asked certain questions. The way they talk was like not really, responding to my questions. So I'm like,
that's pretty
what
common.
Are you talking about, right?
No, that's not what I asked. Right?
Exactly. A lot of people just like, of course, they are like frustrated, but at the same time, they kind of judge you like, oh, like maybe this person is not competent, right? So
exactly, and that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like seriously, like although like you have amazing experience, amazing skill set, if you can communicate clearly with the other people, like then like people are lost, and then they might think that, oh, maybe this person is not competent, and more maybe they're that's actually like worse.
So that's actually but that's actually more common. Like that's the number one thing that happens, and that is the worst thing that could happen to you during a interview.
It's gonna be my last question. So if somebody just wants to go to the next level in the global companies, maybe a year or two later, what kind of thing they need to start preparing in terms of the communication skill?
So one thing I would probably say is absorbing as much information as they can. There's a lot of articles, like scholar articles and just articles in general, and what is happening in that industry. Right? A lot of it is actually only available in one language, which is English, right? Especially for a Korean executive, I would imagine if they're going international, a lot of them are in the tech sector. Right? And a lot of tech news, are in English, right? It is. It comes out first and then it goes out in other languages, right? So I would probably say just get really well read on those aspects. Just kind of be aware or keep abreast of what is happening in your industry, right? So you can speak that language essentially. There's sector specific words that people use all the time. So be aware of that, right? Because you're not only are you going to be expected to say it, you're also going to be expected to understand it when somebody says
exactly.
It, right? And second thing too, I think a lot of the times to kind of prepare themselves, I would definitely work and I'm not saying this because I do this for a living, but definitely work with a coach because that person
actually helps a lot, right?
It actually helps a lot. That person is essentially going to get you prepared as to what you should expect, not just professionally, but just how your relationship with your peers, how is that going to change? How are you going to conduct business overseas as to how you're doing it now?
Right.
And the third thing I would probably say is start, even if it's just kind of sending people messages, right? Start networking on LinkedIn, right?
That's very important. That's
very important. I would say, like, just start networking, seeing what they're talking about, right? Making those comments, right? And it sounds a lot of marketing, but it's also kind of building your personal brand.
Some people say, oh, I don't want to look very salesy, but like if you add a lot of value, like people wouldn't look at you like that way. So.
Like I hope not, right? I hope not. But,
you're very good at it, right?
Yeah,
I was really happy that you actually talked to me first. I'm like, that's how we got connected, right?
Right. So I mean, especially I don't know what it's like in Korea nowadays, but I think it's very similar. When you reach out to somebody that you don't know, a lot of the times the response, especially here in Mexico, is that they're like, oh no, like they're trying to sell me something.
Oh, right.
Right. There's a lot of distrust and like that's really not okay. Because I remember I messaged, I think he was an economist for Scotiabank, right, here in Mexico. And I just reached out saying, hey, thanks for connecting and blah, 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 right? And the guy's response was like, no, like, I don't like getting sales messages for LinkedIn. Yeah, I know.
Okay, he went too far.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, that's okay. I'm just saying hi, like, and telling you what I do.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's okay, sit down, right? But but a lot of that mentality is what I feel like is kind of blocking a lot of these Mexican professionals from being open, right? Being open to opportunities. Like, it's not just you and your friends that's gonna, like, that's nepotism, right? And nepotism is the biggest thing that is dragging this country behind. That's also number one thing that dragged Korea behind for a long time. Right. I mean, you and I coming from Korea, like living in Canada, like we've seen it. This all happened 10 years ago. And I'm seeing the same pattern here.
That's very interesting.
It's, yeah, you know, that's what I'm saying. A lot of people are like, what do we have in common? Why are you like, like, you'd be surprised. It's kind of like living in Korea 20 years ago. Right?
Even if, like, sure, like some people are very like negative about like networking. That's fine. Like, you get no, you get no, and then you just move on to the next person, right? And then there are so many nice people out there, and then you can just exchange information, and you can get inspired a lot by different people in different countries and industries and all that. Thank you so much, Coco, today. It was really fun. And I don't know why, but I feel like I'm so proud of you. Like, it's the same like female Korean entrepreneur in a different country, right?
I'm so proud of you.
So, where can we find you?
I am actually in all platforms. Type in my name is Coco Romero Lee at LinkedIn. Same on Instagram, and then we have our business Instagram as well. Executive Languages MX.
Thank you so much, and hope we can talk about other stuff next time.
Okay, bye bye.